G'day, my name is Mushfiq Majid, student number 2180115111, and this is my history methodology micro lesson on folktales. The introduction is as follows. G'day class, grade 11s have your seats. Today we'll be having a very interactive lesson using folktales as our main focus. So before we start, does anybody have any cultural folktales or folktales that they've heard of that they'd like to share with the class? Oh, great stuff, great stuff. So the cultural aspect of folktales is that they actually have very high importance in the various cultures because they implement life lessons, they implement values and attitudes, all in an effort to teach and educate the future generations on the principles of the elders. Remember, folktales come from a time when people would not write as much down as they do now. Therefore, stories, life lessons, all of that would pass down through these stories. The most common example of it would be the Greek mythology. Greek mythology had a thing called compendium, which is when they would educate the masses on stories. That's why the Greek amphitheaters and all that became so popular during the time, because they're a way for the government and the ruling bodies to educate the people on life lessons and everything in order to have them understand and educate them during a time when formal education wasn't really a thing. So the most common one and the most obvious one I'm going to use is Icarus. Icarus, the man who flew too close to the sun. So we all know that Icarus, his father built wings made out of clay to get out of prison. Then Icarus got too cocky and he flew too close to the sun. His wings melted and he fell to the ground. Obviously, this isn't true because you can't build wings out of wax and bird feathers. And if you fly too close to the sun, it gets colder instead of getting hotter. So, despite the source and the folktale being innately inaccurate, it still holds a very high level of importance. So the importance being that it shows us the life lesson of you shouldn't have too much pride, you shouldn't do things that are too out of your reach, or else you can face dire consequences. It's actually a very, very important part of folktales, as most of them are exaggerated or at times extremely inaccurate. But the lessons that they teach are extremely important. Sources are often folktales are often considered historical sources. They are secondary sources. Remember, the people telling them have not weren't there. This is retellings of stories that they've already heard. It is an important part of history because it allows for the community to share and interact with the stories of the heroes and the villains of previous generations. I've asked you guys to tell me about some of the folktales that you've had, but let me tell you about some of mine. I am Arabic al-Arabiya, assalamu alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan. So, some of the big ones are found in my culture are Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, The Hand of Midas, and Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. These are all cultural folktales that are compiled in the Arabian Nights. Now, the Arabic culture is a little bit different because we have them written down, but a lot of other cultures have used word of mouth to spread these tales. And a great example of this would be King Arthur. He wasn't a historical figure, he was merely a made up imaginary man who fought off the Saxons and all of that. It's actually a very, very good story about riling and bravery, and these are very British things. So all of the folktales very have innate themes that relate to the culture and the philosophy of the people. So, with that being said, the use of different folk tales are often sources that show us people's different perspectives through history and the things that they held dear. So it's actually a very important thing to understand that. Like we used the example earlier, King Arthur and the British people. The idea of being chosen, the idea of leading the people, the idea of bravery and fighting off invaders. This is all very very important Anglo pieces of history and pieces of their culture because those people, that's what they held dear, and they wanted to further that in the further generations. Similar with the Greeks. The Greeks wanted ways to show the Greeks wanted ways to show their culture, their beliefs, what they believed was correct and true. Despite philosophy, which is more of an upper class thing, they wanted to educate the lower end of the people as well. It's actually a very, very interesting way to identify what each culture held dear. As we discussed earlier, a lot of folktales are innately inaccurate. However, Just because they're innately inaccurate, it doesn't allow for the meaning and the symbols behind the sources to be any less important, such as um, such as showing us what they held dear, such as showing us what these people believed in. These stories are often varied due to different people having different interactions, different families, different areas of the country having different takes on the source. However, it all has the same general theme and the same general identification. The main point of the lesson is for you guys to understand that folktales were innately important because it allowed communities to engage with stories and it allowed generations to fill that generational gap despite the advances in technology or anything like that. That will allow the generations to both have the same tales. So with that being said, we're going to create our own folktale today in class. What we're going to do is all of us are going to give a certain part of the story and then we're all going to jot down that story. And then we're going to decide what the important factors are, like are we going to have bravery, are we going to have knowledge, are we going to have war, or what's going to be the main crux of our folktale. So we're going to get on that now. So all of you have told me that you want this to be a story about bravery, about conquest. So it's similar to the ones of Chinggis Khan, but he was actually a historical figure. So this isn't quite a like for like retelling, but it's similar. So you want our folktale to be about bravery and how somebody conquered foreign lands such as Alexander the Great, and that's actually a really good one because then we have the idea of we need to be an expanding people. We need to be a people who move out, that don't just settle where we are. See, that's the kind of things that these folktales tell us about these individual peoples. So who can remember what folktales are? Are folktales primary or are they secondary sources? Correct, Abigail. Um, Folktales are secondary sources because the people who are telling them weren't there and they weren't actually engaging in the content. Life lessons. Life lessons are a very big factor of folktales. So another example would be, like I said, the hand of Midas. That means it's effectively everything you touch turns to gold. That's a gift and a curse. You want all the money in the world, but what are you going to do with it? It's going to suffocate you. It's going to kill you. A similar one would be Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. Now that's actually based off a Chinese folktale called Monkey's Paw, wherein the premise of it is be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. So the monkey's paw would grant wishes, however, it wouldn't grant them in the way the user thought it would. So there's a double entendre, and the effective meaning is be careful what you wish for, and extremely apt even in today's standards. So now for the post subject activity, what we're gonna do is I want you guys to all, you can use your phones if you'd like, Google and find a folktale that you really enjoy. It could be from your culture, it could be from a different culture, and I want you to answer the following questions. What community of people does the folktale belong to? Is it British? Is it Greek? Is it Chinese? Is it Japanese? Etc. What are the main life lessons to be taken from the folktale? Is it a primary or a secondary source? Is the source accurate and trustworthy? Why is or isn't it? And lastly, does it affect the legitimacy or importance of the source, whether or not it is accurate? So get on that, and if you don't finish it, it's for homework. I actually have a secondary activity. It's not compulsory, however, it's a research thing. I want you to look into your own culture and find a whole bunch of folk tales, and I want you to identify the source. I want you to evaluate the source and give an analysis on me. Tell me, what did your people hold dear? What life lessons did your people hold great, and what events did your people actually hold with high significance? That's your expanded engagement, and thank you for listening. Have a great day.